Yeah, welcome everybody. So I have a great panel here of a lot of experts. We would like to give you some insights of what is actually happening in Germany on different levels in financial regulation. So I have the players from different perspectives here. So we have people from the banking side, we have people here from the regulatory side, and we have people here from the consulting side. In Germany, it was a very good news last week. We just heard from the VP Bank, as we call it in Germany, an announcement that a lot of banks in Germany will be able to trade crypto assets via DVP Bank now. So crypto assets, in this case, cryptocurrencies. So Heiko, give us some insights why banks go hybrid now. I just know it from the automotive sector until now. So why are banks going hybrid now as well?
Yeah, thank you, Carola, and warm welcome. Yeah, there are two reasons for that. One is customer demand. And the second one is infrastructure. And maybe to give you an overview of what we are doing in our classic traditional business, we are running security services for 1,200 banks in Germany. We have almost 2 trillion assets under custody. We clear and settle 200,000 transactions every day. We have 5.5 million securities deposits under administration. And this classic business is still growing. So on first sight, one could say there is no reason to look into this new field of crypto assets and digital assets. But what we also observed in recent years, and of course we are now in the so-called crypto winter, but in 2020, 2021, we saw significant outflows from our customer banks into cryptocurrencies, primarily cryptocurrencies, but also other digital assets. And that brought us to the conclusion that there's something going on. Nobody knows how far and how quick this journey will go. But what is of utmost importance if you are a market leader is you must be ready. So you need a defensive strategy and an offensive strategy. And our approach is a mixture of both, yeah. And so this is the customer side, and the second one is the infrastructure side. We have a comprehensive infrastructure which allows millions of customers of our banks to trade. And we quickly figured out that we can use this infrastructure also for trading and settling and custody of digital assets. So what we are doing is, of course, we have to build some new infrastructure, but we can largely utilize and capitalize on the existing infrastructure. And that's why we go hybrid. Yeah? And so say the fuel-consuming cars are still on the road, and the number is increasing, but we also see the move to alternative things like e-cars.
Wow, yeah, that's really great. Christoph, from a regulatory point of view, or from the point of view of the regulator, there is something going on, as Heiko just said, so also the German regulator BaFin will notice there is something going on. So what are the challenges from a regulator perspective, or the perspective of a regulator, when a new asset class, as these crypto assets, as we call them in Germany, appears on the market? So what are you doing, how you deal with these challenges from your perspective?
Thank you, Carola, and thank you, Heiko, for showing what's going on with DWP Bank. So when you look at it from a broader perspective, right, you have to think about it like, I like the analogy that every rose has its thorns. And sustainable financial innovation only comes along with proper regulation. And this is exactly what we see when we introduced Kryptowerte into the German Banking Act from January 1st, 2020. A lot of businesses had clarity And this is something, especially in the financial industry, that is necessary. You can maybe discuss if it's too high or too low, the regulatory barrier, but one of the key elements that we as regulators provide is clarity.
That's some things we always hear also from our clients, why they turn to Germany in the first place. The second one we have to discuss a bit, if they really sustain to stay here. We will see with Mika, we will talk about that in a second. You just said, yes, we need clarity, we need new regulations. So Sven, I know that you're very interested in everything alongside asset management and in particular funds, and the funds in 2021 in this case were allowed to invest in crypto assets depending on the special fund structure, whether it was 100% in crypto assets or some German special funds were allowed to invest up to 20% in crypto assets. So after more than a year now, what is your perception? Is it really the market gone crazy about it? There are a lot of investments now from special funds investing in these crypto assets. So what's your view after more than a year now?
Well, thank you for the question. That was great. I think when you look at the last year was a year of the crypto winter. And as with every asset class, investments in that asset class in a declining market usually don't turn out too great. But there's other things that I want to point out, because first, I think it was pretty cool from the BaFin as a regulator to actually look at what's happening out there, and then to allow direct crypto investment, because that's I think a very important differentiation to make, because the law change allowed direct investments into crypto assets, but indirect investments into crypto assets via ETPs, for example, they were even allowed before, but they were then just not deemed Kryptowerte, but they were just regular securities. So there were indeed, and there still are, I believe, in fact, asset managers who say, well, we have zero exposure to Kryptowerte, but they do have ETPs and ETNs who are actually one-on-one certificates on Kryptowerte, which makes zero sense at all, if you look at it from that perspective. So have we seen a lot of movement with direct investments into crypto assets in fund structures now? No, we have not. Do I believe that this will be growing like a hockey stick when the next bull run comes? Yes, I do. And I also do believe that it is good to have direct investments compared to second layer structures, because they just add cost and risk.
Yeah, definitely. Interesting point. You point out in particular to the ETPs, actually, which, yeah, as you said, doesn't make really a lot of sense, but more costs. So cost is another issue which has to do with infrastructure. Matthias, so as a consultant, you consult a lot of these DLT-based infrastructures for different business types probably. What do you see as challenges for the businesses currently? Do you see a lot of use cases? Is there a lot of requests? And what are your experiences with implementing this technology in the financial services ecosystem?
Yes, so I mean, you can look at it from at least 3 different perspectives. So you can look at it from a, let's say, roles perspective. What kind of role do I want to take in this new ecosystem? You can look at it from a product perspective. What kind of services, what kind of products do I want to offer? And the third perspective maybe is the infrastructure perspective, from a market infrastructure perspective, but also from an internal perspective. And with regards to the roles, I can only agree that the regulation of certain roles, they will be necessary and we will have in the future, and we won't live in a fully decentralized world in the future. So I think that's absolutely necessary to move it out of the gray area and to have regulated players move into the space. And then we see that at this point, really the roles get a little bit reshuffled, and you need to think about what kind of role do I want to take. I mean, the simplest example would be the crypto custody of assets. And we see, for example, that asset managers start to build up custody solutions, which is not in the typical realm of an asset manager. So you really need to think about where is the value created in this new in this new area. With regards to products, I think the biggest challenge is to keep up on the one hand with the know-how internally, to build up the know-how about this new space, and to create new products so that you can keep up with these really fast developments. And blockchain is often discussed from a cost savings perspective, but I also want to bring in the perspective of new services and new products. Think about new fund products where you invest in crypto assets, but allow the assets to also be staked. So there will be new interesting products where you can bring together digital asset know-how with classical asset management know-how. And so you can think also not only from a cost perspective, really from a customer perspective, from a product perspective. And with regards to the infrastructure side, you really have to decide on a few critical aspects. One of the aspects will be, will this infrastructure be more on open blockchains, on permission blockchains? Do I need to be ready maybe to work on parallel existing infrastructures at the same time? So I need to cater for that. And maybe to that point, sometimes if you're looking at the permission blockchain side, it's often discussed only from a cost perspective. On the open blockchain side, you can create also more open ecosystem, create additional value out of this ecosystem, out of being, for example, directly connected to a DeFi ecosystem. And there you can think about new use cases. It's not only about the costs. And then finally, the internal infrastructure. Obviously, you need to integrate new systems, think about, where do I get the market data? How do I look at it from a risk perspective? There are many, many detailed questions.
But does anybody use permissioned blockchains still?
Heiko?
I think so.
What kind of blockchain do you
What's
have?
really the difference here between a centralized blockchain and a centralized database? Can anybody, in simple terms, explain it to me? I've yet to understand. I've challenged anyone in the room. Please explain it to me. Approach me now or afterwards. I'm happy to hear your thoughts. Please.
In the interest of time, probably afterwards. Otherwise, it could be a long discussion. But please turn to him, explain it to him. I love when regulators ask questions and want to understand ecosystems. So please help him. Heiko, do you use just maybe for a second a permissioned or permissionless blockchain? And because it seems to be an interesting question before I ask you my second question.
I have to say, for our part of our solution, we do not use any blockchain. Yeah, we built this on traditional technology, and only with our partner, who really has the core custody solution. They, of course, need a blockchain solution, which is not a public one, to my knowledge. But we run with normal technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. As you are nevertheless, although they don't use blockchain yet, on the forefront when it comes to products. So what kind of value add do you see when using blockchains? Or do you see any value add at all? There are still, we talked today a lot about DLT pilot regimes where you have the possibility to trade normal securities on chain. We talked a bit this morning about finance issues, so some kind of financings that are very commoditized. They could be maybe used. So what are your ideas? What do you see?
Well, currently we have a rather conservative approach because, what we do is when we talk about, I come from customer benefit and customer demand, and technology is per se neutral. Yeah. Firstly, secondly, we talk about products, infrastructure services offered to the public through our customer banks. And that means these things must be solid. You need high quality, you need resilience. Also for us, it's self-understanding that we satisfy the same regulatory standards as we do in the classic business. Yeah, there cannot be any difference. That's first point. Second point, our belief is we will not see really decentralized structures, at least not in public markets, because there's always a demand for trustees, for gatekeepers. Maybe roles change, business models may change, but basically I do not believe that we come back, that we go back centuries, that everybody here in the room wants to be responsible for his deposits, for his cash, which he has in his living room or bedroom. Yeah? And therefore, I believe in centralized structures to continue. And therefore, fairly frankly, currently we see a limited potential for blockchain. We see a lot of potential for new products and solutions. Yeah? But we will exploit and use the technology which suits best. And this could be blockchain at a later stage. Right now, for example, we very much move into decentralized IT structures, modular structures, which are operated in the public cloud. Yeah? And this offers a lot of benefits, but it's not cost. That's also an important point. When people tell me you have less cost in the aftermath, this is not true. This is never true. Yeah? Anytime we add additional infrastructure, yeah, this is an investment. And secondly, my running and operating costs increase. And that's also a discussion we have in the company that we say, okay, when we introduce new pieces, are there any other parts we can decommission? But what we see and I know almost nobody who is really decommissioning infrastructure in a significant amount yet. And this is, of course, I mean, if you have a greenfield approach, you do not have this problem. But as an existing player, you have your existing infrastructure, you have to maintain, and it's always a balance, yeah, how to move forward. And again, I fully agree with what the colleague from BaFin says, it is important that we have solid regulatory standards. We cannot afford incidents and accidents here in Germany. We have seen in recent months on some Caribbean islands. Yeah? This is not our understanding of running and operating public markets.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear. And now, nevertheless, there cannot be a panel without touching also DeFi, decentralized finance. This is maybe a step ahead from where you are currently and where you would like to be or want to be. But nevertheless, in this room, probably it's interesting to hear what we see for possibilities and opportunities there, and if people do. And so, Matthias, what do you see there in your consulting practice? Is there an appetite? Where do you see appetite for DeFi? Maybe even including DeFi, you just mentioned before, staking as kind of one product that could be included in the funds ecosystem, etc. So do you see appetite for DeFi, and in what kind of products? What is your view on that?
So absolutely. However, it's further in the future, right? I mean, crypto is really regulated very well now, and you can set up a compliant service in Germany, so that's fine. And DeFi is a step further away, but we can already think about the use cases that might be possible in the future. And we have seen first pilot trades that really leverage DeFi also for the traditional banking industry. For example, I would mention the issuance that Société Générale did, where they issued a classical bond on the Ethereum blockchain and then pledged it into a DeFi protocol and used it for refinancing and got back dollars. And that's what I earlier mentioned also, that if you have these financial instruments on that public infrastructure, you can use them for many different use cases. That's one aspect where I see where it could go in the future. There are also new roles that you could think about. So if you think about, for example, a decentralized exchange, there are so-called liquidity providers. They need to provide liquidity to the decentralized exchange so that trading is possible there. And for that service, for that liquidity, they earn a fee. So that could be a potential new role that I could maintain as a bank, for example, and where I also need to take into account the new risks. So it's called impermanent loss, for example, that I need to incorporate then in my market risk calculations. So that would be the second aspect, and the third aspect is really to bring really whole value chains in smart contracts. I think about on-chain asset management, where really the whole value chain of an asset manager is represented or coordinated, let's say coordinated through smart contracts. So the investor can directly send funds into the smart contract to invest in the so-called, let's say, fund, not in the regulatory sense, but maybe in a technical sense, invest in that fund. And then the asset manager can interact with that protocol, interact with different other trading, decentralized trading or lending protocols to do the asset management. Some other party might do the risk calculations. So the value chain is really deconstructed into the different components, but there is still, valuable financial services in there that smart contracts cannot replace. And so, for example, an asset manager could think about whether it's a very efficient new way of distribution to bring his valuable service of asset allocation into this new DeFi ecosystem.
Interesting to hear. Now, it kind of goes to Sven. Oh, you wanted to say anything, something, because I was about to pose a question to you, because you are a very visionary person, because I know you for a long time now, because therefore answer to him, and it goes a bit to that, what do you see for products not only, but also will it stay as centralized as it is currently, or do you also see more decentralized players in the market where you put, as Matthias just said, your money on an on-chain fund?
Yeah, I mean, standing here and hearing Matthias speak is funny, because looking far ahead is sometimes a blessing, but most of the time it's more a curse. Because I was saying exactly the same things like in 2018 when I was working for an asset management company that I finally left because I thought it was a little bit slow what was happening there. So I fully agree with what Matthias just said, because there's a lot of things that asset management companies do that could be done with a smart contract in a better way. Some of those things are not there yet at this point in time because of gas constraints or whatever you might have on a public blockchain. But I also believe that public blockchain infrastructure can deliver very good upside when it comes to the regulator, because the regulator and everybody else gets at first time gets the opportunity to actually look onto the chain and see, for example, if we say, okay, we have an investment fund, and in this investment fund strategy we have a strategy that does this, and we only buy tokens, for example, that do that. You can look on chain, look in the investment fund and see what's inside if you want to make it that transparent. So there is the possibility to do so. You could also take the smart contract and program that smart contract in a way that certain barriers are not met, that things are directly sold, for example. But this is, in fact, a little further ahead. So do I believe that things will stay as centralized as they are right now? No. And I do think that Heiko and I probably we are like on different sides of the spectrum when it comes to that centralized versus decentralized aspect. But do I believe that there will always be some centralization? And would it be that only the entity that programmed and then deployed, for example, the smart contract, is the one regulated? I would say yes, that is something that we will be seeing. We won't be seeing that within the next 2 or 3 years, I think, but maybe within the next, well, if we would have Christoph everywhere, then maybe we would be there in like 2 or 3 years. But I do believe that this will be taking probably like 6 or 8 years. But it will happen.
Yeah, now it's interesting to see the BaFin view on that. What do you see? I have 2 questions actually, and then we are done. I just got a hint. 2 questions. How is BaFin dealing with these kind of upcoming issues in the DeFi ecosystem? So these funds on chain, is there a perspective that regulators kind of say, yes, let's program jointly so that there's supervisory part is part of this entire setup. This is one, and then totally unrelated to that, because we talked a lot about MiCA today. And a lot of people ask, well, and approach us here and say, well, Germany was on the forefront because we were the first player that really had a decent license in place. What kind of advantage will German players, licensed players have? Because we heard a lot about MiCA today, that it's then easier for them to transition into the MiCA regime. So maybe what has BaFin done or plans to do in order to help them to kind of transition smoothly into the MiCA regime?
That's a lot of questions.
Yes, I have even more, but I don't have time.
And there's a lot of statements that I also want to comment. So people talk about decentralized ecosystems and distributed blockchains. And in reality, DeFi is not as distributed or decentralized as people think. Look at the amount of governance tokens in one hand, just to give one example. And you can look at the base layer, Ethereum. How decentralized is Ethereum really? I just followed some recent research, and actually it turns out it's not as decentralized as a lot of people thought.
Yeah.
So we have to look at like the fundamental facts as well, and not just, I'm sorry to say that, some of the things that we pretend to be recognizing. So having said that, I think we have two aspects here, as Matthias mentioned. We have, like, if you look at the technology, like DLT, it can be used, as Heiko also used, it can be used to bring down the cost. Okay, fine. But if you look at the broader impact this has, there's also new products coming up, what Matthias was referring to, right? There's new markets coming up because of that. And this also questions existing players in the financial world. Where do they want to position themselves? Is if the world in the future will be much more determined by decentralized ecosystems. And this is one of the core questions, that is a strategic questions that the market participants have to ask themselves. Nothing a regulator can, like, you know, oh, you have to do it that way or that way. No, we can only provide the boundaries. Like, you know, it's like we can provide like a framework, like, you know, and then the canvas you have to paint on. But we provide the framework. So, but how does that relate to MiCA and so on? I think the fundamental difference that we have with MiCA, and I think this has not been emphasized enough, with MiCA, the first time in Europe, we have regulatory clarity throughout the union. And that is something we did not have before. And this is something that, if you look into other areas in the world, that some countries they look at, or some areas they're looking at us, they say, wow, that's something to be almost envious about. So that's one thing to look at. But the other thing is, of course, when we look a little bit into the future, as Sven already mentioned, there's aspects that are, like, you know, many years ahead of us, and looking, for example, on on-chain governance, as you said, Matthias, right? Then if you discuss on-chain governments, and this is really, we're talking about the topic far ahead, we can also have to discuss about the topic of embedded supervision. Like, how can you make sure, if you're in a decentralized ecosystem, that the aspects that you want as a supervisor, financial stability and consumer protection, how can you make sure they also exist in such an ecosystem? And this is just some food for thought. But we'll be taking part in the discussion, and I'm very optimistic that we'll come to a good conclusion and a good solution, not just from a financial stability perspective, but also from a market perspective.
Perfect. We could talk ages about these topics. We even did in our prep call, so we could entertain you now for an hour more, but we run out of time. So thank you very much, all of you. It was very insightful as always. And yeah, don't forget to answer Christoph's question. So for the DLT experts here in the room, please turn to him afterwards. So thank you very much.